Well, all right, everybody. This is a little video about the primary source interpretations that I'm going to have you guys do. In this assignment, you are functioning as a historian. You're going to take a primary source, you're going to read it, you're going to gain insight into the past based on that primary source. Then you're going to find a secondary source that helps you understand the broader historical context, the broader story. So in this first example, we have a low range, a C, D sort of assignment submitted by a student. The primary source is the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, an American slave. So Frederick Douglass was a slave, or I should say he was an enslaved human, because of course no one is a slave, we just create slavery. Anyway, he wrote this primary source, and if you just read the primary source, you may not know that much about slavery in the South. And so the idea of the secondary source is you gather more information so you can tell a more complete story. Primary source tells you details that are specific and help reveal the past. The secondary source helps you put this primary source in a context or in a general frame of reference. This is a low range PSI. It has some brief discussion about the slavery was legal in the South. It confuses what the historical context is. It says it's the farm where Mr. Covey lives. Well, that's the setting of the primary source, at least this one chapter of the primary source. But it's not the larger historical context for why Frederick Douglass was a slave, why he was a slave in the South, why he was able to escape to the North and get his freedom, why he was able to be punished brutally, legally in the South. And so there's a whole bunch of things about the secondary source that can help you reveal things about the primary source. The primary source is a narrative of Douglass's life. Here it says the main point of the source is that slavery was horrible and Mr. Douglass wanted to be free. Not exactly. The main point of the primary source was Douglass wanted to raise awareness about the brutality of slavery for Northerners. So the reason he wrote this is to tell Northerners about slavery in the South. This is an example of getting specific details out of the primary source, but not enough information to really tell us something about the past. So it says this shows how important it was for people in the North when they started to know about how bad slavery was in the South. All right, sort of. But it doesn't really tell us too much. This is a improper footnote, but at least they use the citations. At least they tried to correspond to how it's done using the superscript in Chicago. All right, so that's a C to D range. Here we have a mid-range, a B, C+, somewhere in there. Our primary source this time around is what? A letter from Sherman to the mayor in the city asking to, spare the city or something about that. It has some direct quotes from the primary source. That's kind of good. It talks about the context of Lincoln not being able to get good generals. That's kind of good. Sherman was able to march all the way to the Atlantic until the Confederacy surrendered. Okay, but what's specific about this letter? So Sherman talks about fighting a harsh war. Lincoln wanted peace, but he also wanted the South to surrender. Civil War was a very bloody war, and Sherman helped Lincoln win re-election. All right, that's true, but it doesn't really connect back into this letter very much, right? Well, the reason that it's important, the letter is important and the land is important, is because the battle occurred right before the election, and it was a victory that helped Lincoln say, all right, the war is going well. We're gaining ground, right? We're doing what we're supposed to be doing. This has pretty good footnotes. Let's see, we got an access date in here. We could have a little bit more information about what this web address is. William Tecumseh Sherman. Okay, what is it? Is it, well, just what kind of website is it? You need to have more information about the website. And what else? We need more context about the Civil War. Why was the Civil War being fought? Why is Sherman in Atlanta? What is it about the war that makes it a harsh war? Some of these things would be useful to know if you want to tell the story of this. There's some grammatical errors. So this one picks out important things in the past. It picks out the significance of the Atlanta, but it doesn't really zero in on it. It tries to give some context, but it doesn't really zero in on it. It has some good detail from the letter, but the detail from the letter doesn't really help support the overall interpretation. So let's look at a really good one, shall we? Okay, this is a primary source interpretation about Seneca Falls, which is 1858, so it doesn't really fall into a time period. But this is a good example of how to put in the context. We have a date. We have the summer of 48. People are getting together in New York. They are making a case that women are equal and want suffrage. It's the first such convention. Gives some social context, right? That there's a Republican motherhood, social gospel is in here, cult of domesticity is in here. The idea of women's equality was radical, so Stanton used the language of the American Revolution. All right, this is a great concluding sentence. It ties together this idea and then also gives you a little bit of a taste of what's going to come in the analysis of the primary source. So the Declaration of Sentiments, that's Stanton's primary source, says that all men are created equal, modeled on the Declaration of Independence. References New Jersey. By linking the struggle for women's rights with the words of Thomas Jefferson, Stanton started a new fight for equality. Whoa, we like that. It's tying this primary source into bigger issues in American history. The citations here are pretty good. This should be in italics, but it's otherwise pretty nice. This is not exactly a second repeat citation. It probably should say Declaration of Sentiments. But overall, this is fairly well done, and it would be in that high A range. So what do you need to do with these things? You need to interpret the meaning of a primary source. You need to have a secondary source that helps establish the context or the larger story behind the creation of that primary source. You need to put it all together. You need to explain why it's important. You need to write well, and you need to hopefully tell us something about American history that isn't quite so clear from just the general textbook. Hopefully, this is in some way useful for you. I'll put up these 3 examples of high, medium, and low primary source interpretations in course documents. Enjoy!